Which of the following has strong enough teeth to chew through a bulletproof vest? A. A limpet. B. A shark. Or C. A human. There's only one correct answer, and it's probably not what you think. Keep listening to Formosa Fauna to find out which it is. Spend the next 20 minutes feeding your brain with Formosa Fauna so you can learn all about the animal kingdom and become smarter than all of your friends. Every Friday is Formosa Fauna Friday. Hello, I'm Tristan Hildebrand, the voice of Formosa Fauna. I love animals and I love talking about them. On today's agenda, we're going to talk about why birds don't lay more eggs when they actually definitely could, banded bullfrogs disturbing residents in Taiwan, the creature capable of chewing through that bulletproof vest, and a chimp-obsessed woman landing herself in police custody. Lots to talk about today, so let's dive right in. Crows lay 2 to 6 eggs, blue tits lay 9 eggs, robins lay 4. Why do some birds lay more eggs than others? And in fact, on another note, in replacement experiments where eggs were removed from a nest, birds would relay them repeatedly to compensate for the loss, suggesting that they could lay more than they typically do. In the 1940s, British ornithologist and evolutionary ecologist David Lack proposed that clutch size, which is the number of eggs laid, clutch size, is not controlled by the female's ability to lay eggs, since birds can lay more eggs than they typically do, but rather the number of eggs laid by any species has evolved to fit with the food supply available. So, nature favors clutch sizes that correspond to the maximum number of young that the parents are likely to be able to sustain. Let's suppose a pair of birds can only find enough food to feed 2 chicks, but they lay 12. At least 10 chicks are going to go hungry and possibly starve, and it's likely that all of them will. If the bird only lays 1 egg, however, the additional food would go to waste or be unused. So, neither of those would be a good reproductive strategy. Instead, laying 2 would give the best chance of raising the most offspring. David Lack's theory became known as the food limitation hypothesis, or Lack's principle. However, there was another question to be answered. Why do most bird species have bigger clutches or more eggs at higher latitudes? On average, birds near the equator lay about half the number of the eggs laid by the same species in the far north. While this could be explained by greater food scarcity due to shorter day length near the tropics, other factors are also likely in play. Higher latitudes tend to have higher mortality rates. Think harsh winters, so the large clutch sizes may have evolved to provide enough of the species, enough chicks, to make it over to the next breeding season, as some of them are likely to die off. However, some hypothesize that the tropics have relatively more predators, which could be more influential than food supply or day length. For areas with high nest predation, there also tends to be smaller clutches. The smaller the clutch, the less energy wasted. Also, larger clutches are more susceptible to being found by predators. Unfortunately, when it comes to blue-footed boobies, I must introduce you to the concept of siblicide. With blue-footed boobies, females typically lay 2 eggs, roughly 5 days apart, and by the time the second chick hatches, the first one has already grown considerably. When food is plentiful, the parents will find enough to feed both offspring until they fly the nest. However, when food is not plentiful, the larger chick will peck its younger sibling to death, in turn getting more food and increasing its chances at survival. because if food is scarce enough and it does not do so, both chicks may starve and die. While this only happens sometimes with blue-footed boobies, it relatively happens all the time with the masked booby, as the first hatched nearly always kills its sibling, regardless of food availability. Just when you thought the invasive species were done wreaking havoc on Taiwan's ecosystem, well, here we go again. Volunteers in Nantou County have donned their eco-hero capes, armed only with determination and flashlight beams to tackle an unexpected nocturnal nuisance, the invasive banded bullfrog, also known as the Asian painted frog. According to the Nantou County Department of Agriculture, we'll call them the DOA, this amphibious interloper is wreaking havoc with nocturnal serenades that can hit a whopping 70 decibels. They say that's as loud as a ringing telephone, and it's apparently been disturbing residents across the region as they try to get some sleep. Once a rare visitor, this frog was first spotted at Kaohsiung's Fengshan Reservoir back in 1997. According to reports, it has since hopped across to Tainan, Pingdong, and most recently into Nantou. By daylight, the banded bullfrog is shy and elusive, finding refuge in burrows it digs itself or snug tree bark crevices. But come rainy nights, it becomes a croaking powerhouse. Croaking nuisance. Citizens started dialing 1999 in Taiwan, not for an emergency, but to report sleeplessness and ecological concerns. The DOA responded by deploying volunteer-led removal teams beginning in the Dapi community. The mission doesn't stop there. These frog retreat squads are now also on the hunt for other unwelcome guests, such as spot-legged tree frogs and cane toads. 3 dedicated specialists from the Society for Taiwan Amphibian Conservation have been training volunteers to sharpen their identification skills and understand the ecological stakes so they can correctly distinguish invaders from their native counterparts, the native frogs. Here's a handy guide on how to spot the difference between the bullfrog and the native chorus frog, courtesy of the experts. The banded bullfrog can grow up to 8 centimeters, sports vase-shaped patterns on its back, and even has little toe suction cups for climbing, traits that the native ornate chorus frog does not have. Seeing suspicious frogs in your area? Local authorities say snap a photo, then dial the county's 1999 public service hotline to request removal. Your phone call could help restore peace and protect Taiwan's native ecosystems. And the photo makes sure the frog is identified properly. I am a nature girl, so as soon as I see any sort of animal out in the wild, I want to be its friend. I have been educated though, so I know it's best not to disturb them, and if anything, let them come to me instead of the other way around, but not everyone has that self-control. According to current records, Taiwan is home to about 37 native amphibian species, around 40 total, including the introduced or invasive ones. While none of Taiwan's native frog species are known to be dangerously toxic to humans, danger is lurking just a hop away. The cane toad is considered one of the world's worst invasive species, and they have indeed made their way over to Taiwan. Its skin toxins, called bufotoxins, are generally dangerous only when ingested, and surface contact could cause irritation. Wherever you are in the world, if you do accidentally come into contact with a frog, regardless of whether or not you know it's poisonous, don't panic. The good news is most frogs aren't harmful to touch. However, wash your hands thoroughly with unscented soap and water. If it was a cane toad you accidentally touched, usually this will be enough. Always avoid touching your face or eyes with the part of your body that touched the frog, and monitor for symptoms of irritation, nausea, dizziness, and more, as these are some of the most commonly recognized signs that you need to seek medical attention. If in doubt, better safe than sorry, always take a trip to the doctor to be sure. If you do plan on hiking or camping or spending any kind of amount of time in the great outdoors during your next trip, especially to an unfamiliar environment, research what will be hopping around out there beforehand so you know to stay far away or not to be scared when one of them brushes by you by accident. I will say some places in Taiwan I feel like there's a specific season and a specific kind of weather, specific kind of altitude where I will just see a massive amount of frogs. I think it's been to the point where I've not been able to get into a building because they're kind of just everywhere and I don't want to step on any of them. Of course, that is in a well-lit environment. So if you're out in the wilderness where you don't have as many, street lights or anything like that, sometimes it does get very hard to avoid frogs. So like I said, do your research beforehand and you will have hopefully a lot less to worry about. Taiwan is an island that is 70% covered by mountains, lakes, and jungle. Taiwan's early connections to the Pacific and Southeast Asia are well established and are the basis for seeing Taiwan as an ocean nation. Did you know that over 17,000 species thrive in the deep sea where no light penetrates the ocean waves? Or that there are 38,000 different kinds of microbes in just 1 liter of seawater? These were all discoveries made by the Census of Marine Life, a 10-year international effort that assessed the diversity, distribution, and abundance of marine life. Today, we're going to learn all about limpets. They are described as looking like small volcanoes. Very cute. Limpets are a kind of sea snail that have learned to adapt to survive in today's ever-changing environment. Over the course of a day, as the tide rises and falls, limpets cope with cold water and crashing waves in addition to dry air and the possibility of being boiled by the sun. If you're looking out for them in the Atlantic Ocean, you can find them most easily when the tide is out, but it's also when they try to keep to themselves more. Limpets clamp their shell tightly to a rock using a combination of its muscly foot acting as a suction cup and a sticky goo to glue itself in place. This also helps them to not dry out and makes it more difficult for hungry predators to pluck them off. When they're in this state, in fact, it can take about 100 kilograms or 220 pounds of force to actually dislodge them. If you're a weightlifter or you ever go to the gym, you can think about just how much weight that really is. 100 kilograms or 220 pounds of force. When the tide comes in, it wakes the limpets up and they will start to search for food. They have a sandpaper-like tongue, like cats, and will use it to scrape at young seaweed sporelings. If you get close enough, you may even be able to hear them chewing. As they move around across the rocks, they tend to leave zigzag trails, which is another telltale sign that they are nearby. Limpet teeth are the toughest known biological material. Limpet teeth, according to the BBC, consist of the strongest biological material ever tested. That is incredible. And yes, that makes them significantly stronger than human teeth and even shark teeth, which are actually about of the same strength. Human teeth and shark teeth, they're about the same strength. Apparently, should they feel inclined, limpets could chew their way through a bulletproof vest. So there you have it, the answer to the question I asked at the beginning of this episode. Researchers in Taiwan have turned ordinary perches into miniature bird observatories, complete with spy cameras. According to the Agriculture Ministry, a collaboration between the Taiwan Biodiversity Research Institute and National Pingtung University of Science and Technology began in January last year, installing raptor perches near farmland in Hualien. They captured a surprising variety of visitors and a peek into natural pest control at work, as reported on by Taiwan News' Sean Scanlon. It wasn't the everyday backyard birds that showed up, though. The perches attracted 12 different species, including black-winged kites, stealthy kestrels, silent nighthawks, brown shrikes, and even the melodic black-throated robins. Black-winged kites and kestrels tend to patrol the skies and hunt down rodents that can often plague farms. Brown shrikes, nighthawks, sparrows, and black-throated robins also do their part by feasting on insects. By simply observing who lands on these perches and when, biologists are gaining valuable insight into local wildlife diets and behaviors. And more exciting to them, this data could encourage farmers to rely less on chemical pesticides and more on nature's own pest control squad. The Organic Agriculture Research Center also built 10 solitary bee hotels, miniature havens for bees that nest alone, either underground or in above-ground cavities. These busy pollinators, such as leafcutter bees, are vital for crops. To sweeten the deal, native flowering plants were planted around the bee hotels, creating a bloom-filled buffet and diverse habitat that supports organic farming and Taiwan's broader food web. I just can't help but think it sounds very cute. Bee hotels. Meanwhile, in Malibu, the United States of America, a mountain lion suspected of attacking an 11-year-old girl was shot and killed by authorities. The report says the girl was out feeding chickens when she sustained a bite wound on her arm. She's currently at a nearby hospital, though, where she's expected to make a full recovery. There are an estimated 4,000 to 6,000 mountain lions in California, according to Fox 40 News, the Mountain Lion Foundation, and ABC7 San Francisco. The mountain lions have had to face various challenges, including fragmented habitats, restricting them to smaller territories otherwise also affected by development. Recent wildfires have driven much of the population into other areas, also increasing the likelihood that people will run into them. Tonya Haddix, a Missouri woman featured in the HBO documentary Chimp Crazy, has been sentenced to 46 months in federal prison for concealing the whereabouts of a chimpanzee named Tonka and lying to the court about his fate, according to World Animal News. Haddix, 55, pleaded guilty to perjury and obstruction of justice after telling a U.S. district court that Tonka had died and been cremated. In fact, she was keeping him in a basement cage at her home in violation of a 2021 court order to transfer him to the Center for Great Apes Sanctuary. The order was part of a legal case brought about by PETA over the treatment of Tonka and 6 other chimpanzees in her care. According to court records, Haddix secretly removed Tonka from her property before the court order could be carried out. Over the following year, she submitted false statements and sworn testimony about Tonka's death, including claims that she had his ashes. In June 2022, authorities discovered Tonka alive in her basement and transferred him to the Save the Chimps Sanctuary in Florida, where he remains. Court filings state that even after entering her guilty plea, Haddix had attempted to hide another chimpanzee in her home. A search on July 9, 2025, led to the recovery of the animal, and Haddix has been held in custody since then, pending transfer to federal prison. Tonka, who appeared in films including George of the Jungle and Buddy, had been the subject of a years-long dispute over custody and care. In May, the Captive Primate Safety Act was reintroduced in Congress. The legislation, sponsored by both Republican and Democratic U.S. representatives and senators, would prohibit private ownership of primates, with exemptions for accredited sanctuaries, zoos, exhibitors, universities, and laboratories. Any thoughts you'd like to share about today's episode? Send me an email at tristan@rti.org.tw. That is tristan@rti.org.tw. Making it to the end of an episode makes you a Formosa Fauna friend. Thank you for tuning in, friends. See you next time for Formosa Fauna Fridays here on Radio Taiwan International.